most concerning charge is that the integrity of the organization was compromised. So once that integrity is compromised, then the question is, how can you trust any of the systems that are in place?
Whomever looked at that report felt that there was no need to respond at all from October to February until there was a recall. That is a dereliction of duty.
Total incompetence. They misjudged this from the beginning. It's not a matter of money. The FDA has a $6 billion budget. The administration was behind the curve. FDA needs to step up their game, and hopefully we'll solve this problem very quickly.
We're talking about the baby formula situation there, and now the administration initiating the Defense Production Act, and there's some questions about what that means big picture. Is it the right move to make? Will it change the dynamic quickly or not? Let's bring in our panel. Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, and Jerry Seib, executive Washington editor for the Wall Street Journal. Leaving that column this week. I want to talk about that, Jerry, in just a bit. But your thoughts on the current situation. Let's start with the baby formula move and what this administration has done this week.
Well, look, I think they're playing catch-up, which is pretty obvious. And I think that as a political matter, at a time like this, when you're playing catch-up, when you're trying to make up ground, you've already kind of lost the issue politically. And I think it's probably a situation where there are going to be a couple more weeks of this, which you have to hope, I think, really leaving the politics aside, is that people get the baby formula on the shelves quickly, because that's the important thing here. And I do think there's going to be a lot of questioning about not why are they doing the right things now, because I think the things that are happening now are fairly obviously the right things to do. The question is going to be, how did we get here? Why didn't this get prevented, as the Congresswoman suggested 3-4 months ago?
Yeah, and Leslie, that's the question on a number of different fronts, whether it's the baby formula, whether it is what happened in Afghanistan, whether it's gas prices. You look at markets today, they're down 236 in the Dow, a fairly bad day today, but it's a long stretch of weeks that we haven't seen this down number of weeks since 1932. Gas prices, though, the average continues to go up, the national average of gas prices, and now $4, topping $4 in every state across the country, if you look at the map, and there's not a sense that those numbers are going down anytime soon. So as with the baby formula, there are some people on Capitol Hill, and it's not just Republicans, some Democrats too, saying, can we get ahead of the curve on doing something when it comes to this?
Well, I do feel strongly, Brett, that gas prices or gasoline and baby formula are apples and oranges, okay? Because one, we're not ingesting, God willing, anyone is ingesting gasoline, and certainly we're putting formula into our infants' bodies. So let's break it down separately very quickly. Baby formula, when you have it tainted, do you remember years ago there were people buying it from China online, and there were some problems with that formula? This is one of the reasons America's the best nation in the world for this, and people don't like regulation, but this is an area where regulation is key, and it does take time. Was it too much time? Should the administration have been doing these things a bit sooner? I think so, quite frankly, but I'm not really certain it would have changed all that much. But 2 weeks, whether 2 days or 2 minutes to a mom is essential. But when you look at gas, that's a whole different thing. You're looking at an international market. You're looking at prices that are specifically dependent upon crude oil, those barrels, what those prices are, and that, whether a president is Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or somebody we haven't heard of yet, does not control that. I know people say Keystone Pipeline wouldn't affect gas prices for years, and of course drilling, if you have land leases and oil companies aren't willing to do that. The question that is the same with both issues is, how did the oil companies and how did companies like Abbott have record profits during all these times?
Okay, now that question, it comes up for Democrats, Jason, all the time. My proposition was, can the administration get ahead of an issue that they know is coming down the tracks before it becomes a crisis? And that, it's not that anybody's ingesting gasoline. It was about the administration anticipating the next crisis they're going to have to deal with.
Well, in terms of the baby formula situation, yes, they could have gotten ahead. And there are still things they could do, but are reluctant to do. One is to address the tariff issue. First of all, government policy is what put Abbott in control of 40% of the market for baby formula. These were monopolistic arrangements they had with states that allowed them to be the sole provider of formula for recipients of low-income recipients of baby formula. That was a government policy put in place. That could have been addressed. But here we are. And what could we do? One thing we could do is ramp up production abroad and import from places. You don't have to import from China and places like that or India. You can import from Canada, which has very good safety standards. Why aren't we doing that? Because there are tariffs in place, Brett. And granted, they were put in place by the previous administration, but Biden could lift those tariffs, and that would address the problem. And he's unwilling, or at least right now, to do that. But that would be the most direct way to get at the issue.
Jerry, speaking of Asia, the president takes off and has taken off for South Korea on this Asian trip, and a lot of focus on what's happening with China. He's not making a stop in Taiwan. Some people wanted him to do that. He's not making a stop at the DMZ as North Korea is saber rattling again. Your thoughts on what the administration is trying to accomplish with this trip?
Well, look, every single move on the world stage right now is, at the end of the day, really about one word, and that word is Ukraine. And I think what the president needs to do now is to show essentially that there's an Asian component to the worldwide alliance that opposes what Russia is doing in Ukraine. That clearly doesn't include China, but it does include America's allies in Asia. And I think the key one there is actually probably going to be India in the long run, and India is kind of a holdout on this front. But I think, as President Biden himself indicated in his own words, I think in the last 24 hours, in the long run, a lot of this is about making sure that the Chinese understand that there's an American presence in Asia. We're not distracted by Ukraine to the extent that we cannot continue to pay attention to what's happening in China. And I think the Ukraine ripple effect may very well be North Korea's interest in making sure everybody understands that it has nuclear weapons and that it can use the nuclear threat, much as Vladimir Putin has used the nuclear threat in Ukraine. That's got to be cut off at the pass, and that's part of the agenda as well.
Jerry, I want to stay with you. Your column, the Capital column, coming to an end after 3 decades. I read it every week. In your last one, after 3 stormy decades, some reasons to find optimism. We have 4 parties, not 2, Trumpists and traditional conservatives on the Republican side, moderates and progressives on the Democratic side. The forces at play are driving politics away from the center, where solutions are usually found. Our democracy has always adapted, and it can do so again. The power to make it survive and thrive remains in the hands of all of us who participate in and benefit from the great American experiment. You leave that column, and congratulations on a great run. With optimism, Jerry?
Well, I hope I'm right. But yeah, I really do think the genius of American democracy is its ability to reinvent itself, to adjust, to adapt, to change the circumstances that nobody really saw coming. And that's how we've survived 200 plus years in this country. And I think we can do it again. It's hard to look at the current political debate, including to some extent the primary elections in both parties this week, and conclude that the center will hold. But I think you have to believe that in the long run, and that you go through periods of transformation and transition. We're in one now. Those are messy, but we get through them. We've gotten through them before. I do really deeply believe we'll get through this one all right.
Yeah. Jerry, congrats on a great career. Panel, thanks so much.